everyone hear me? Cool. So I'm going to use a handheld mic because I'm going to do some interpretive dancing. No. Yep. So thank you. I'll be brief. Hopefully, I get you guys to love or at least like Coyotes a little bit more today. Personally, I don't really care what you think about me, but let's get some love to those Coyotes. And so why do I love Coyotes? Well, whoop, I'm sorry. That's Coyote love. That's not why I love Coyotes. Okay. Why I love Coyotes? Because I love dogs. Okay. So this is my dog Finn and my 7-year-old daughter. And I know, dogs originated from wolves, but they're still related, right? Canis lupus, Canis latrans, and Canis familiaris. And so, there's behaviors that each one of you who has dogs or been around dogs, coyotes, right? Like this, right? The play bow, right? That's something that coyotes do as well. When you get home and they're doing that whole body wag, that's again something that coyotes will do when they're excited to see their pack members, their family members. And they give kisses to each other. They're very affectionate. They vocalize a lot. Even like a little whimper, like same thing that you hear out of my adorable guy Finn, you would hear through a coyote as well. And I love them because they're just fun to watch. So I got into advocacy through wildlife photography, and it was a long and winding journey. And I just knew that I needed to do more than just take photos. But through all of my experiences, whether they're deer or elk, prairie dogs, I do love watching prairie dogs. Coyotes have always fascinated me. And one of the big things about coyotes is that they're accessible, right? So they're ambassador carnivores for other species that we may not see very often, like our mountain lions or wolves, our black bears and grizzly bears. So we get to observe their behaviors. And this is by far my favorite one. So have y'all had the pleasure of seeing a coyote or even a fox mouse? And so what happened just before this is that first the coyote locates the mouse or the little rodent, right? And so he turns his head this way, and then he kind of does this little shimmy down. I watched a guy the other day on Monday for like 5 minutes. He just kept shimmying down, and then he came up, shimmying down and came up. But so they get down, and they feel like this is my chance, and they just lunge forward. And it's particularly amazing if it's snowy, because they'll land on their nose, right? They'll just full on kamikaze into the snow. In this kind of situation, they typically land with their paws in front and save themselves from a bloody nose. But I also love them because they're affectionate, because they're family oriented, and because if given the opportunity, they'll mate for life. And so you'll see them often touching each other and loving each other. And a lot of that happens coincidentally. I don't know how they planned it, but Valentine's Day is peak coyote mating season. So I don't know if they worked out a deal with Hallmark or what the situation was there, but that's when you really see them engaging in a lot of affection and affirming new bonds and then reaffirming old bonds throughout the years. And with the family structures, so oftentimes the female daughter will stay with mom and dad, and that's what they are, mom and dad, right? Like, we don't have to give them other names. And then the sons will go off and try to find their own territory and their own new pack to form. So that first slide, that was the guy that's leaning down. That's dad. That's dad saying, son, we don't do this in our family. No, thank you. And so this is another reason that I love coyotes is sure they show affection, through those loving displays, but also if they're mad, they're going to show it, and they show it, through the shackles up, through their teeth bared, but they're not going to draw blood, right? That's just their way of expressing, hey, I'm pretty pissed off at you, and you don't ever do that again. She's like, I'm staying out of this. I don't know what's going on here. And so again, like dogs, so if I give Finn a particularly yummy treat or a special treat that he hasn't had in a while, he'll want to go outside, and then he runs out in the backyard. He gets that treat and he throws it up in the air. He does his play bow and his full wagging, right? She's doing the exact same thing with her little rodent snack that hopefully has passed away by this point. But to see that pure joy out, like, I got a meal, I got something to eat, like, it's something that I'll always appreciate seeing in our coyote friends. And so distribution and habitat. So oftentimes when we talk about animals, you can talk about the prairie dogs or wolves and how much habitat that they used to have, right? And now it's down to this. Well, we can't really say that with coyotes, can we? So if Borat was here, what would he say? He'd say, their populations are a great success, right? And so then it's like, well, why are you working for an organization called Project Coyote? Like, why do we need you? Why do we need to protect coyotes? That doesn't make sense when we look at population levels. But is that always the whole story? And why have their populations been a great success? Well, there's a couple of different reasons. One, we tried to kill coyotes. We're still trying to kill coyotes, but it's not working. It worked really well with wolves. It worked pretty darn well with mountain lions and grizzly bears. But what set coyotes apart from those other animals? And that's adaptability is one of them. Well, the first one is, we got rid of those other ones. And so they went from mesocarnivore to now they're top dog. They're running around like, hi, no wolf gonna get me. I'm all on top now. And so that's one reason. The second reason is because of adaptability. And that adaptability comes in a lot of different forms. So that's adaptability in their food sources. So they're happy, eating fallen fruits. They're happy eating crickets and grasshoppers. There's a dead deer over here. Yep, I'll eat that too. We got some rabbits and some rodents. I'll have all of that. So they're really not dependent on one species or a couple of different species, right? They can just roll with whatever's given to them. They're also adaptable in their habitats. They're happy in the mountains. They're happy in the desert. They're happy at the beach even, down in Texas. They're beach coyotes. So all of these things have led to them really thriving. And so by thriving, I mean really thriving, right? So the dark area is where they used to live, the historic range before 1700. And as you can see today, they're on the West Coast, they're on the East Coast, they're in Alaska, they're down into Central America. I mean, they're really doing it. And so I've always had this picture in my head, and luckily AI exists now, and this picture has escaped my head and is now presented to you, of when colonists first came across the US, expanding, Europeans expanding their territories westward, that coyotes were like, excuse me, going through, excuse me, and now they're going east, and they're like, hey, I heard there's some eastern wolves and some red wolves. Maybe I can mate with them and become a little bit larger. And that's what happened. That's why our eastern coyotes are now a little bit bigger than what we have out here. Oh, and one other thing that led to their ability, on their adaptability, is that they're like people too, in that, hey, I'm happy living in a family group, but I'm also happy living on my own. And so that's yet another way that they have kind of escaped our persecution at a population level, but not at an individual level. And so now we're going to see, I'm sorry, the love portion is kind of coming to an end, and we'll talk about the bad stuff. So wildlife killing contests, right? So there are multiple ways that we're still persecuting coyotes. That's both through individuals and then also through our government. And so wildlife killing contests, luckily, there are 8 states that have outlawed them. 2 more states, hopefully, will make some progress on, and then the other 39 still allow killing contests. And these contests will give prizes for the biggest coyote, for the smallest coyote, for the most coyotes. And it's not just coyotes. You see it on there. It's, again, your prairie dogs, your wolves, your mountain lions, bobcats, you name it, people want to kill them and win prizes. So indiscriminate killing on our public lands, again, that's both our federal government and then also our individuals that go out. Both individuals and federal government in many states can still use leg hold traps, snares, are very popular. Luckily, I live in a state where you have to have a permit and you can only get it if you're a rancher. Otherwise, to kill a coyote, you either have to shoot them or through a box trap. So that's one way. That's our federal government there. Wildlife Services does aerial gunning, and they will just shoot a coyote if it's near cattle. I mean, I'm glad that we don't do that to people, right? Like, if you're just near a situation, they're gonna shoot you. Pretty wild. This one's disturbing. So these are M44 cyanide bombs. So luckily the BLM doesn't allow this anymore on their lands, but they're still prevalent on other public lands. And so the coyote, or even, it's happened to domesticated dogs where they bite onto this, it shoots cyanide in their face, and then they die an excruciating death and end up all contorted, just absolutely atrocious. And then this is one that gets overlooked a lot, where we're talking about, like, the other ones are basically like weapons, right? Well, we tried a different method. And so the origins, as you can see on the tail here, that's the beginnings of infection with sarcoptic mange, or autocorrect calls it sarcastic mange, but that's a different story. So the origins of this can be dated back to about 1900 in Montana. The Montana state veterinarian decided, we can't kill these coyotes. What are we going to do? I got an idea. We'll get some coyotes, capture them, infect them with sarcoptic mange, unleash them into the wilderness in hopes that they will get in touch with other coyotes and wolves, and then they can spread it. And so that's where we are today. And it starts with the tail. They can lose all of their fur. They end up itching continuously and get these scabs where you can't hunt if you're always itching, right? So these are animals that you often see wandering around during the daytime. I'm a child of the 80s. That's my favorite 80s math show, MathNet. So I want to talk a little bit about Wildlife Services and some of the math breakdown there. And so I think the diss on services is very appropriate. So in the past 5 years, about 62,000 coyotes were killed by our federal government. That's 309,045 coyotes that were killed with your taxpayer money. Do you think that there were 309,045 coyotes that were having conflicts with people, pets, or livestock? I highly doubt that. So that program costs about $100 million a year. And it's not just coyotes. 56, I think I'm reading it right. Yeah, 56 million wild animals have been killed by Wildlife Services in the past 20 years. So I'm sure there are Doge representatives listening. I think I have a new project for you in wildlife services. And so does killing coyotes actually save ranchers money? So coyotes get blamed for a lot. And one of the things they get blamed for is just being around cows. And so oftentimes when there's calving season, they'll be around because there's afterbirth there. And that's an easy, quick, nutritious meal. And so that's going to attract the coyote. That doesn't mean the coyote actually killed a calf. But then there's other times where, during calving, during lambing, that those animals are going to just naturally die. And that coyote is going to show up and try to get a free meal. So what do you think would happen if coyote finds a dead calf or a dead lamb, and then the rancher shows up and finds coyote eating? We're going to blame the coyote and kill the coyote, right? And then studies have also shown that the main time that coyotes can actually kill a calf is within the first 2 weeks of his life. And so, one way to think about it is it better to kill the coyote, or maybe think about selling the cow that isn't defending her young, right? So there's always two sides. And another issue with removing coyotes that are not causing any issues is you're opening yourself up for more problems down the road. So I call them buffer zones. So if you have a pack of coyotes that lives around your ranch, they're not predating on your livestock, leave them there. That they're going to defend that territory. If you kill them, more coyotes are just going to come in. You don't know what their intentions are. You don't know if they're going to start eating or targeting your livestock. And so it's best to keep the animals that aren't having any conflict with people on the landscape. And so other unintended consequences, Dr. Scott Henke did a research project in Texas, and he found that when you removed coyotes from that particular area, that then jackrabbits tripled in population, which then competed with forage for the cattle, and they had to lower their cattle densities because there were so many jackrabbits. And then we've talked about kangaroo rats a couple of times. So kangaroo rat also, once the coyote was gone, kind of suppressed other rodent populations, which then changed vegetation types on that ranch. So a whole bunch of trophic cascades happened from removing those coyotes. And then foxes moved in, and raccoons moved in, and they started going after ground nesting birds. So, when we pull a string in our ecosystems, we don't necessarily know what's going to happen in the long run. And so here's another fascinating part, is that when you kill an older mated pair of coyotes, older females can only produce about 4 pups every year. A young female can produce 12 pups a year, but she's not mating because mom's mating, and only one set's going to be mating, right? And so you get rid of that matriarch, young daughter is starting to produce 12 pups. Now you have more coyotes than you began with. So I always say, if you like coyotes, don't kill a coyote. If you don't like coyotes, don't kill a coyote, because you're actually, study after study has shown that you're going to end up increasing coyote populations over the long run. And so I know a lot of us here, I get pushback sometimes when I talk about coexistence, and they're like, oh, Mark, this isn't a Disney movie. It's not a fluffy world out there where everyone's just coexisting, banging a bongo drum, having a good time. And so I bring up this example. So these are my grandparents. My grandparents coexisted in the same house for over 50 years without killing each other. And that's what I'm talking about, right? We just don't want to kill each other. And so while we know that coyotes are doing well at a population level, we got to make sure that we're also thinking about them on the individual level. Thank you.
Alrighty, so we are gonna take like 10 minutes because we're a little bit over for questions for any of our panelists, our online panelists, Mary and Mark here. So does anybody have any questions? All right, we got a question.
This question is for Mary. Is there any evidence or research around European honeybees and the proliferation of invasive plants?
Didn't hear the question, I'm sorry. Do more honeybees lead to more invasive plant species?
Yeah. Now that I hear the question, do more honeybees lead to more invasive plants? I didn't mention it, but I mentioned the specialist native bees that prefer these just particular plants, and they're real key for saving. Native bees are real key for pollinating rare plants, because they will go to them, but honeybees don't. What honeybees want to do is go to where they've got this big colony to support, and they go to the most common mast plants. Now, sometimes that can be a native plant, say lots of sunflowers or something, but often the most common, the most massed plants, the plants in most abundance, are invasive plants that are spreading quickly. And then, of course, they serve the purpose of pollinating them and increasing their reproduction, while if they've outcompeted or transmitted diseases to your native bees, you're limiting them on those on plants, but they're also threatening the existence of rare plants because they can lose their pollinator, and that has happened in one case in southwestern Utah, where the plant no longer has its native pollinator at all, and then that threatens of course the existence of that plant, because the honeybee isn't going to go to that rare plant.
Thank you. All right, we got questions over here.
Hi, this question is for Mark. And yes, coyotes are doing quite well in Florida. I live on a barrier island and we have coyotes. The question I have for you is, given the persecution that we see ongoing, are you making, or are scientists, biologists making any inroads in getting that message to the ranchers, the farmers, the people that do see them as an enemy? Do you see any type of thinking changing there? Are any of these folks entertaining some new ideas, some new thoughts, or are you making any progress?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. I would say it depends state by state, even locality by locality. I know in Colorado, I can speak to that most intelligently, that there is progress. You know, even our chair of the Colorado Parks and Wildlife Commission hasn't killed a coyote on his ranch for over 30 years. So again, in Colorado, I think wolves are actually going to help a lot with these coexistence strategies, because previously, because we have an unlimited season, so unlike certain species that have unlimited seasons for a finite amount of time, still in Colorado, like many states, it's year-round, unlimited, and so that's been a disincentive to make change, right? So why would I go through these non-lethals when I can just go out and shoot the coyote. But with wolves, what I'm hoping to see, and this is since this is such a new program, where we have a lot of non-lethals available, not only available, but we also have the knowledge base out there for ranchers that's being communicated from Colorado Parks and Wildlife, from the Department of Agriculture. And so those are not just wolf specific non-lethals. They work just as well on coyotes, just as well on bears and mountain lions sometimes as well. And so I'm hopeful. And then again, on a case by case basis, there are people that are willing to try new methods. I know in Idaho, there's a rancher, Glenn Elzinga, and again, he got into non-lethal in herding there, where he's keeping range riders out on the landscape all the time. He got out into that specifically again for wolves, but it's also having positive impacts with the other carnivores on the landscape. So yes, it's slow, and it's when you're giving specific names, you know that there's still a lot of work to be done, and it's not just a blanket positive movement forward.
Thank you. This is for all of the panelists. My question is around the idea of care versus control of these species. When people have, to get people to care about things, have you created or have you seen examples or stories of a negative interaction motivating more than a positive interaction? I just wonder on which side you would come down on how to get folks to care about things. Is it usually conflict? Is it usually stewardship? I just am wondering about the spectrum of interactions that species have with people.
Thank you. Yeah, I can start there. It's a variety of ways to get people to care, right? So there's an old adage that says, if someone has a negative interaction, like at a restaurant, they're going to tell 9 people, where if it was a positive interaction, it's like 1. And so we're dealing with the same things with some of these species, where we have to overcome those 9 negative stories so that we can then tell the positive story. And so what we do at Project Coyote, and me personally, is I feel that a lot of caring can come through art, and can come through whether that's photography, through literature, painting, whatever it may be. And then also inspiring those younger generations. My favorite part about working in this field is going into elementary schools and seeing the raw passion that's inside all of us for animals when we were children. And then I think there's also the adult education piece on how to live with these animals is incredibly important, so that you can remove some of those myths that are out there, some of those unfounded fears, and give them actual tools, even if it's in an urban or suburban area, of how to live with coyotes.
Does anybody else have a response to that before I move on to the next question? All righty. So we are taking 2 more questions.
Hi. This is a question about prairie dogs. Douglas County, Colorado actually runs a vaccination program for their prairie dog colonies. They mix a vaccine up with little berries or something, and then they go out and they drop the berries throughout the colony, and the prairie dogs are vaccinated against the plague. Is that something that could be expanded instead of using the insecticide?
Yeah, I'll take that. Yes, that's what I was discussing in terms of the new techniques and technologies. What you're referring to is a product called fipronil. People use it on their pets, cats and dogs. and basically you give it to them as a tablet or something. In this case, the formulation is it's mixed up with some things that prairie dogs would like to eat, something sweet and tasty. They're delivered onto the prairie dog town in off a four-wheeler with a machine called a triple shooter that distributes those pellets in different ways. Unfortunately, it's only in a test version now. The Food and Drug Administration, because it is a food and not a pesticide, or that's what they have deemed it to be anyway. They have to approve it for use, and right now it's just a conditional approval, so it's very limited. It's also we haven't figured out how to scale that up into where we could treat tens of thousands of acres at this point, and just because there are some manufacturing limitations. But yeah, that's underway, and I think you're talking about Southern Plains Land Trust lands, and they've been deploying it there very successfully, and it's working quite well.
Okay, well, last question.
Hi, I am seeing kind of a through line for all of you of charismatic species, like protecting and caring and kind of using those species to then promote the survival of associated species, as we saw with bumblebees, ferrets, and wolves. And I'm just wondering to hear a little bit about if you see that as more of a Band-Aid solution to protecting these species like native bees and prairie dogs and coyotes, or if you do feel like that is actually a way to get at that protection and also, integrate the public in that.
I'll start. So I don't think it's a Band-Aid. I think it's just one delivery system to get people encouraged and involved with caring and protecting our wildlife. And so, I think if wolves weren't around, we could still advocate for coyotes in just the same passionate way, because people do love wolves so much and don't have those experiences. Then, it is nice that coyote can fill that void in someone's life where they want to experience a wild carnivore, but can't get to Yellowstone or up to Canada or Alaska. And so, yeah, I haven't consulted Coyote, but I'm fairly certain they're okay with being ambassador for multiple species.
I think iNaturalist is an important vehicle for people learning to appreciate and value the diversity of species, because of course that's real people on the other end of your photo for iNaturalist who will go through, say, all the beetle photos or all the bee photos or all the plant photos and tell people what they found and saw. And so bumblebees are, like you say, kind of a charismatic bee, but I think once people become familiar with bumblebees, they start seeing other bees, and they, in fact, it was interesting, I just got an email from what we've been saying to BLM and Forest Service, that they need to not, we don't believe they legally can re-up apiary permits like they have for decades with categorical exclusion, that they need to do an EA or an EIS. And I got an email last week from a BLM manager of it's the Condor National Monument north of Los Angeles. I can't remember. But he started doing Bumblebee Watch with Xerces, and now the state realizes they have a BLM person who knows bees, and they're asking him to advise them on a state policy about honeybees. And it just came about because of his using the iNaturalist and Xerces process, and he fell in love with bumblebees. The staff, the half-time staff, I'm volunteer director of Project 1100, but I have a half-time staff person who's 39 and just entering entomology graduate school this fall because she had been a vet tech for 20 years, but went on one STEM internship in the summer about bumblebees and decided that's what I'm going to do the rest of my life. So I really thank Josh for putting this panel together because I think it's so easy to fall in love with species if you know something about them, their habitat, and if you see them in the wild. So I appreciate. Again, I don't think I have a lot of legal handles around cattle on bumblebees or bees, but I'm appealing actually to the BLM and Forest Service managers on a personal look. You could be threatening 500 species of bees on your forest, and you don't even know it, all for this one permit of honey when they can be on private lands. So I think we need to always think about art and photos and so on, because the managers are people too. And I think we can appeal to them. The more we talk about the more species, whether it's beaver or aspen or whatever, that can appeal to them personally. It's not just a Band-Aid.
Awesome. Can we get a round of applause for our panelists, please? Okay, and last thing, the conference here is over, but tonight at Squatters Pub, which the address is in your programs, we're hosting a speech at around 6:30 with Professor of Environment and